And that's how we learned the fire we hid in our bones was never meant to flicker. It was meant to blind gods. If you've stayed with us this far, remember, the night is loud, the dust is hot, and the next choice is the one that counts. Now watch closely. The desert wakes. The spotlights find their mark. The story breathes. The engines cut and the hull stopped shuddering, leaving only a ringing in David's teeth and the sour bite of recycled air. Outside the transport's ramp, a nighttime desert outpost lay bristling with stacked shipping containers, chain-link corridors, and guard towers that swung hard cones of light over a rocky yard scarred by old explosions. Smoke crawled low across the sand like a tired animal. Someone had turned the sky into a black sheet studded with indifferent stars. 3 sentries met him at the ramp with weapons up, but not quite steady, scaly hands twitching on grips as if the triggers might bite back. The big one wore a translator collar that chewed his words into gravel. "Move, human." The way he said human made it sound like a diagnosis. David raised his shackled hands and brought the chains together just loud enough to make the nervous ones flinch. He didn't hurry. The lines on his skin, inkless, dark, and alive under the floodlights, drank the glare and returned it in thin, shifting echoes. The sentries looked the way all off-worlders looked the first time, intrigued, unsettled, trying not to stare. They pushed him through container halls converted into a council detention grid, gray walls, ammonia clean, rumors and fear braided into the recycled air. Cells clung to both sides like metal hive combs, faces pressed to transperisteel to catch a glimpse. Whispers rolled in languages that slipped past David's ear like fish. "What are those marks?" The smallest guard blurted before the leader could shut him down. "A rookie," high voice. "Shoes too new for dust." "Reminders," David said, smiling without showing his teeth. "Of home." That made the rookie stumble. That made the rest tighten their grips. Fine by David, nerves make mistakes. Mistakes open doors. They delivered him to a medical bay cut into the side of a container stack, where cold light made everything look sterilized and tired. The doctor waiting for him was tall and chromium silver, skin catching every photon like a mirror's breath. 4 eyes, each tracking its own curiosity. Her badge scrolled, "Tini, xenobiology." Her scanner purred like a restrained hornet as she circled him. "Fascinating," she said in crisp standard, not bothering to hide the pleasure of being first. "I've read dossiers on human physiology. I've never examined a living subject." David sat on the table without the ritual of being asked. Chains clinked. "First time seeing the patterns, Doctor?" "They're not tattoos," she murmured, instruments fanning. "Not scarring. Subdermal structuring with bioelectric activity. They respond when you emote." She glanced up exactly as the corner of his mouth moved. Her readouts jumped. "See? Spike." "Mood rings," David said. "Fashionable where I'm from." "Your species doesn't do ornament without function," Tene said, 3 eyes staying with the skin, one measuring his face. "You build meaning until it weighs as much as a tool." They marched him on after that, down into maximum security, where a clear wall like frozen water turned a cell into a display case. David sat on the bunk, cross-legged, back to the bulkhead, letting the dark filigree along his arms breathe in the dim. The compound beyond his wall was a geometry of stacked containers and welded catwalks. Spotlights kept raking the yard. Beyond the fence, the desert rose in broken rock the wind could never quite finish. It looked like 1,000 other way stations meant to make bodies wait and minds fracture. He'd learned a long time ago that minds were stubborn clay. A hard-footed figure arrived within the hour, Commander Voss, cut from quarried dusk. Gray skin, broad frame, expression that said the mountain had already outlived you. Universal translators tended to flatten other people's names for convenience. Granite folk was what they were called by species who liked to put labels on things they feared. David Ross, Voss read from a slab of light. Detained after a failed diplomatic call in the Outer Rim. No priors. 34 standard. "That's me," David said. "What was your real assignment?" "Diplomacy." He let the word hang like a dare. Voss came close to the barrier and studied the lines with the exact same confusion David had cataloged from 100 different faces. "What do these signify?" "They're personal. Our reports say humans don't waste pain or pigment." "Everything you alter, you weaponize." David stood and stepped nearer so the commander could see how the darker lines seemed to lie under the skin and yet move when his pulse asked them to. "You want a translation, Commander?" Voss's small eyes lifted. "I do. They mean I remember. Remember what?" David put a single fingertip to the transparent wall. Under it, the marks responded, a low glow that caught and held the spotlight slit and sent it back thinner, sharper. Everything. Voss took that away with the same silence he'd brought in, only stopping at the door long enough to order 2 changes. Raise security posture, and fetch him everything the council had ever written about human cultural practices. David returned to the bunk and let his breathing find its own tide. The compound's lights kept scissoring the dark, and the wind kept moving dust like a patient scribe. The lines on his skin warmed, as if the desert night had crept indoors to sit with him. Other species called it decoration. Humans called it something else, quietly among themselves, far from microphones. A library. By morning, the doctor would peel back mystery with instruments. By noon, the commander would bring questions shaped like shackles. By nightfall, the patterns would answer on their own. And the outpost would learn what wakes when you read the wrong page aloud. They left him alone long enough to believe in quiet, then took it away. Tenay's lab was a cathedral of light and glass nested inside a shipping container's bones. Holograms hung like translucent flags. Data scrolled in ghost letters across the floor. Reed, the green guard with the 2 honest questions, stood by the door as if curiosity were contraband he might have to surrender on the way out. Again, Tenay said, all 4 eyes working in parallax. Slow breath. Don't speak, David did as told. The scanner's tone climbed until a second instrument, deeper, more patient, joined it. Lines bloomed around him in the displays. Curls and lattices mapped beneath the skin, then through muscle sheets, then sketched around nerve bundles like ivy learning a wall shape. That's not possible, Tenay whispered, which in research dialect meant I'm thrilled and terrified. They extend past dermal layers. They trace vasculature and innervation in deliberate paths. She used the word deliberate with reverence. Reed shifted. Doc, the deep scanner picked up. Text. The room's air seemed to notch tighter. Tenay stabbed a command and the big projection magnified again, past tissue planes, past fibers, until the image stuttered on a grid. Microscopic symbols set within living structure, row after impossible row, as if letters had learned how to be cells and cells had agreed to keep the secret. How much? Tenay asked without looking away. In that sample? Reed swallowed. Thousands of characters. If the density repeats, millions. Tenay's secondary hands hovered as if afraid to touch her own console. Get me the linguistic engine. Priority wrote. I want a brute force sweep against all index scripts and compression families. They made the call. The facility's language AI arrived like weather. No visible entrance, only a difference in the pressure of the room when it began to work. It chewed the sample, rejected alphabet after alphabet, then changed tactics. Partial success, the synthesized voice announced. Encoded content exhibits multi-layer compression aligned to bioelectric gates. Not traditional text. Functions as storage and executable schema. Layers classify as historical accounts, technical specifications, narrative frameworks. Say stories, Reed murmured. Stories, the AI agreed, because sometimes a simpler word lets the mind take the next step. Tenay had asked herself, quietly, what kind of species puts their library where knives and sunlight live? She didn't ask it aloud. Instead, she said, translate a complete segment. Any segment. The lab's light grew thinner with concentration. Characters unwound themselves into rendered speech and image. The first piece came up cold and factual. A battle report from a colony that had stood under an alien sky until it didn't. Smoke, heat, weapons that threw metal and fire at shadows that drank both. A name for the attackers that translated roughly as devourers. A conclusion that translated as everyone died and somehow the memory did not. David kept breathing. He let the lab have the silence. Another, Tenay said, voice too soft for a room this bright. The next segment wasn't council history. According to the encoded record, first contact between humans and the elder powers of the galaxy had not been a treaty. It had been a refusal. The enemy wore light and called itself eternal. They insisted devotion was the price of survival. The humans said they didn't kneel. What followed was 3 centuries of math-defying war described in angles and grief. Tenay stopped asking for pieces and started building requests like staircases. She brought up star charts that didn't match anything the council had mapped. She skimmed manuals that outlined devices her physics said could not be. She read accounts of human defeats catalogued with the cold discipline of surgeons. She read one sentence twice. We learned because we could not afford to forget. When the lab's horizon ran out, she pointed every instrument. She had it the densest knot, the lattice clustered over the human heart. Even on a simple monitor, it looked different, layered so savagely that the pixels became a lie. Central focus, she ordered the array. All power. The AI hesitated. Warning. Pattern exhibits active response characteristics. Deeper analysis may trigger unknown functions. Define unknown. Autonomous modification. Signaling. Behavioral code. Reed flicked a look at David through the glass. David stared back with a patience that made Reed's hands feel too young. Proceed, Tane said. When the scan came down like lightning, the room answered back. Alarms boiled into being. The holograms staggered. Through a camera's eye, they watched the prisoner in his desert cell sit up as if woken by someone whispering his name. The lines on his skin brightened, each stroke a quiet blade drawing itself. David lifted his face toward the lens as if distance had never been invented. You wanted to know what we carry, he said, voice riding the intercom uninvited. Now you've asked the right way. In the lab, the translation header for the heart lattice appeared and Tane felt her own pulse miss. Prometheus Protocol, final phase implementation. Not a weapon, she said to no one. A civilization architecture. The desert outpost spotlights kept swinging over rock and container steel. Beyond the fence, the wind changed and brought the smell of old fire. They had peeled one layer too many. Somewhere outside the compound, the night leaned in, listening for the word that would wake a species. Inside, the word had already arrived. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council usually burned hot and brief. Fear likes to sprint, not endure. This one sprawled over days, fraying tempers into threads. Above the debating tiers, a live feed from the desert outpost flickered. A human in a clear-walled cell. Lines on his skin turning night into script. Ambassador Krell paced with too many legs and not enough patience. They've placed intelligence in meat, he snapped, mandibles pinched by disgust and envy. Every human is a courier. Perhaps a contagion. Counselor Nim, water breathed into Grace, lifted a translucent fin. Speculation carries weight it cannot hold. We require facts. Fact, Krell said, stabbing at the feed. The patterns contain histories of wars we never fought, technologies we never imagined, and routes to places we never charted. Fact, they did not volunteer any of this. High Chancellor Dex, not born to patience but practiced, cut the chamber down to quiet with her voice alone. Dr. Tane, report. The detention outpost's lab bloomed beside the main feed. Tane looked wrung out and awake in the same breath. Honorable Council, the scan sequence has moved beyond passive reading. The pattern over the subject's heart is active code. We're detecting quantum entanglement signatures that extend beyond our tracing capacity. How many endpoints? Dex asked. Unknown. Thousands at least. Across multiple systems. The chamber exhaled like a single lung. Even the Silicon Confederacy's harmonic speaker glitched a tone. Strategic implication. Unacceptable. Commander Voss, Dex said, bringing the granite profile into the triad of windows. Weapons implications? Our analysis suggests designs that violate present theory, Voss said. The words were flat. The meaning wasn't. Gravimetric manipulation, temporal effects, direct matter conversion. Whether those designs function in practice remains unproven. If they do, any defense we understand is inadequate. Krell seized the silence. Containment protocols. Now. Detain all humans in council space before they coordinate hostile action. Nim's fin cut the air. You would intern an entire species for the crime of remembering? Krell bared what passed for teeth. For the crime of lying. Dex let the argument run until it tried to accelerate past wisdom, then killed its engines. Tane purpose, why store this in bodies? The central lattice appears to carry a directive header, Tane said. We have a name. Prometheus Protocol. Context, existential war. Opponent designation, Eternals. The word Eternal slid across the chamber like cold metal. Old myths woke in old species. Most were supposed to stay asleep. Bring the human to a console, Dex said. Minutes later, the outpost feed cut from the cell to a secure terminal on a catwalk with chain-link railings. The desert wind bullied the microphones. Spotlights made the dust look like a weather system. David's lines had found a steady glow like banked coals. Members of the council, he said with a politeness that didn't ask permission. Ask, Dex didn't waste the courtesy. What is the Prometheus Protocol? David touched his chest and the lattice there answered with a warmer pulse. It's the reason I'm talking to you from a live world instead of a ruin. When a power calls itself divine, it believes it cannot be outlived.